I actually had a good lesson on that a while back about how you have two kids. One has a positive thought process and the other one has a negative thought process. I mean, I'm not going to be the first to tell you, but I was that way myself. You can have a good positive outlook on something, or you can be completely negative every single time about something. It's easy to do. That person has it so much better than me. Well, what's wrong with what you have? That's very scary. I didn't realize until I got older in life. I'm like, wow, I need to be careful of that, because if I don't, I could be like the Cain, be like Abel. Which one do you prefer to be? And once again, you go back and read this, it's like, okay, that's easy to read it. But what happens when that's you in that situation? You have to self-reflect a little bit. What are you more committed to? Does anybody have any other examples of? Yes, Aaron.
I was thinking about the younger generation of Israelites that wandered in the wilderness for 40 years while the older generation died off. That younger generation stayed committed, kept trying to do what they were supposed to do, and eventually stayed committed to go into the land as well.
I was thinking about Noah. Noah did an amazing job. He did something that was never done before, let alone even heard of before. And you're thinking, wow, he built this ark, right? 40 days and 40 nights. And I can't remember the exact number, how long it took him to build the ark, but you're thinking all this time, he was dedicated, he was true to what he was doing, he believed in everything while everyone else was laughing at him, they were mocking him. And when the time had come, guess what happened? He was laughing then, right? But the thing that got me the most was at the end of that, what happened to Noah? He was found where? My memory serves me right, it was by a whale, and he was intoxicated. His clothes were off. What happened? He spent all this time being committed, and all of a sudden he made a really bad decision. Just because we've been doing this for a long period of time does not mean that we can't stumble and fall and be exactly what he did. Trey, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to provide the obvious one. Jesus is probably the best example of commitment, 100% commitment. Isaiah prophesies about him that he'll set his face as a flint. So his face would be as stone prepared to be struck over and over again. So for 3 years of ministry, he was continually just opposed. And there's so many passages, particularly in John, that he talks about doing the will of God. My will is to do his will. And all sorts of references like that. Just complete dedicated to the will of the Father.
Yeah, I started thinking about his apostles too. Or disciples, excuse me, that's about his disciples. Right, what happened to them? Were they just as committed? Who was left at the end? It started off with, 12? How many were left? If we start off as a big congregation, if we're not be committed to it, what's going to happen? One by one, we're going to start falling away. We're going to go somewhere else. So we got to realize that if we're not doing the things that we're supposed to be doing, then we're going to be no different than what we constantly keep reading in the Bible. Thought I saw another hand somewhere. Maybe my David. Sorry.
I don't know if it's as obvious as Jesus, but
yeah, I mean that is the best one.
I was thinking of Abraham. Abraham's very committed. His entire life is just commitment from beginning to end, with some mistakes here and there, of course, but definitely committed. Leaving home, what he did with Isaac. He was all in. Every example we have of him is total commitment.
Yeah. Patrick? I'm sorry.
There are so many people in the Bible that we can name, but I was thinking about Abraham. But then you can also think about Joseph. Joseph was committed to God with all the things that he went through. Mm-hmm. He was always faithful to God.
Greg, did you have your hand up?
I was thinking about on the day of Pentecost, the Christians that stayed, many of whom were away from home, and they had just been baptized. And the scriptures talk about them continually devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching. And talk about a quick commitment to serving God, or at least what seems to be, these were ones that gave up, trusted God to take care of them, and gave up, all that they had, many of them.
If I did your hand up, I kind of skipped you, I'm sorry.
So I was thinking also about Nehemiah and also the people, like committed to rebuilding the walls, especially against all odds, like having other people working against them, and also just having, I would assume most of the people had not had as much background in construction, all of them, that you would expect, but yet they were committed to the task. They had the goal ahead of them, and they worked together to make it a profitable outcome.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Who else had their hand up? I'm sorry, I saw a bunch of. Yes, Shane.
Talking about people with commitment. Commitment's awesome, but what you're committed to is really the key, because Jezebel was pretty committed. But, I mean, she was all in. But where was it taking her?
Saul early on that was committed.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yes, Chris.
When I think about examples of commitment, one of the ones that comes to mind for me is Peter, but more so because he was someone who thought he was committed. Peter was committed to be committed. He was convinced that he was, but there are a lot of passages that talk about him being an important part of the church as it would be. But there were so many times where Peter came so close and stumbled and failed, or leaned on himself. And so thinking that you're committed is part of it, but sometimes that can be misleading if it's not the truth, if you aren't actually totally committed.
No, that's a fair point, because if you believe that you're committed to something and then you get so comfortable into what you're doing, then you probably stop showing up less. You probably figure, well, I can just go anywhere in this area and go somewhere. They seem to be spot on, and they do less. We have to be careful about that. We cannot be fraudulent with ourselves, believing that, we're good, but if we rob ourselves, then what? It's only a matter of time before you want to step away from it completely. Greg, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, it said the Bereans were finding the truth, studying the scriptures daily.
Did I see another hand over here? No? Okay. Thank you. You guys have been great so far. I appreciate it. And this was part of my lesson, I was going to bring up examples like this just to see what all you guys knew. And just as I expected, you guys know a lot because you committed to it. But it's not just because you memorize this stuff so you have it in your back pocket to show it anytime you want. No, this is something you're doing every single day. The details that you guys have, that's revealing that you guys are doing this. Not because you were told, because you're ordered or instructed to, because you devoted yourself to it. There's a lot more that goes to it. Now, obviously, I'm not, but I see a bunch of men in here that are married. You had to commit to her before you got married, right? I see a bunch of guys in here who have kids. You just can't commit to them when you want to. That's a 24/7 job. I don't know how hard it is. I don't know the struggle with that. But that's something that you have to do every single day. We have to read our Bibles every single day. We can't just come here and it's like, okay, well, it's time to read it. That's not commitment. Name anything, whether you're working out, if you're doing your job, your hobby. Is it really what you think it is? Is it easier to watch it, listen to it? Do the work. You'll find out for yourself that it takes a lot more than what goes on here at this building, or when we have a men's Bible study, or if we have any study. You know, the person doing it had to do a bunch of work. You know, I've been a teacher before, not here, but when we were at Melrose. That's a lot of work. You really do appreciate the teachers that do that. And I appreciate what Eddie Caskey does on Sunday mornings and what Josh Keith gets up here on Wednesdays. That's commitment. You know, they could have been just one and done. We have to continue to keep going forward. Let's see here. Trying to find something that will tie in with this lesson. All right. If I can get someone to read Psalms 37:5, and then if I can get someone to read Proverbs 16:3, and then Psalms 37:4, and I believe we'll stop right there.
Make your way to the Lord, trust also in him, and he will do it.
Make your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established.
Yeah, Psalms 37:4, excuse me.
Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart.
Something I found interesting was just the word commit in the Bible is referenced over 164 times. That's pretty impressive. Why does it need to be referenced that much in the Bible? I mean, that's a bunch of times it occurs. Anybody have? The word commit? I think it's a lot more important than what we realize. Because I want to believe that at certain times in our lives, maybe not right away, but at certain times we get kind of going just a bit too fast, and then we kind of start skimming over things. It's not that we're not committed, it's just that we start seeing that, you know, wow, I've been kind of dodging some stuff lately, and it's not me, that's not the person I want to be. And it kind of gets I would hope it gets your attention really quickly. Charlie, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to add that Jesus speaks a lot about commitment. He talks about counting the cost, and he talks about who loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of me, he who won't take up his cross. I mean, so God expects us to understand commitment and to be committed. That's the only way we're going to be faithful to him. He asks people to give up everything from a worldly perspective.
These passages that you just pointed out, it's not only that he asks us to be committed, but there's a reason for us to commit to him and who he is. And one of those reasons is because he's, you know, is one of the answers, Jesus, he's sent Jesus, and he is committed, fully committed to our well-being and our salvation, so much so that he had the plan to send Jesus. Romans 8, you know, really talks about him, what he's done to commit to us. And you brought up parents, and I think this is a big piece of, you know, obviously I don't want to, my boys are here, so I don't want to sell them down. But dealing with our kids, right, there's a co-commitment, just like there's God's committed to us, we're committed to God, and then sometimes that means that Peter made me think, Chris's comment, that we're going to mess up and not stick to all the commitments, right, all the time, and we're going to make mistakes. And when there's that co-commitment, that means that we're going to fix it. And really, that's the wonderful thing that, you know, we all should know, is God's so committed to us that we can fix it with him. He's made a way that we can say, you know what, here's what I did, and I'm sorry, and then we turn away from that. And so it's important for our kids to know that. And I was thinking Peter versus oh my goodness, the one that betrayed Jesus, Judas, and how he responded to messing up, right? And was not the same response to recommit.
That's a good point. Nathan?
So speaking of why commitment is important, it's kind of interesting. The last book of the Old Testament, Malachi, he talks about people bringing kind of lame sacrifices. They're doing it, but they're doing it half-heartedly. He's like, I wish you would borrow the Lord with the lamb. Likewise, the last book of the New Testament, he's talking to Laodiceans. He says, you're lukewarm. I wish you would be hot or cold. I want to spit you out because you're between. Which is interesting. God's really harsh towards those who just have one foot in the door or sort of there. So it's pretty sobering for us because if we don't fully commit, then we're going to end up in those two situations like those guys.
That's an excellent point. God wants 100%. He doesn't want 90 or 99. He wants that full 100%. And my dad taught me that too when I was growing up. He said, when you get in a relationship with somebody, make sure you're giving 100 because you expect 100. Are you giving 100%? That's a really good point, Nathan. Eddie, I think I saw your hand up.
Yeah, it's really along the lines of what they were talking about just a moment ago, is that it's been my experience that the most miserable times of being a Christian is when I was just trying to do the things that would get me by. You know, it's only when you're committed that you actually have joy and peace. Because when you're just, like somebody a moment ago, being half-hearted, you're always just barely holding on. You know, and it would be really easy to give up. Peter was a really good example. Like in Proverbs 24, it talks about a righteous man may fall 7 times, but he's going to get back up. And that's what commitment is all about, is that you know you're going to make mistakes. You know there's going to be days you're not going to want to do it. But being committed is a stronger, more passionate motivation than the things that would keep you from it. And so if that commitment is there, the tasks come much easier.
And something, too, that I've gotten a lot better at is prayer. Because what you been discussing for a while now on Sunday mornings, it's like, yeah, I would pray, but I wouldn't do as much as I should. I wasn't committed to it like I needed to be. And that made a huge difference. When I started doing it more, I'm like, wow, what a difference that made. So I've really been enjoying that class. So, yes, Shane?
For those that keep up with college football, this is a great example of commitment, right? All these high school kids commit to their quote-unquote favorite school. But just because they say, I'm going to go to X school, they've committed. Have they committed? The truth is no, because that verbal commitment requires follow-through and eventually something sort of like the signing of a contract, right? So many of these kids go out there and say, I want to go here, but they're not fully committed to it. I think that's one of the reasons why in the Bible you see so many references to commit, because it requires follow-through. And if something requires follow-through, then we need reminders because it's something that we have to keep up with. It's not just a say it once and you're done and walk away. That's why things like contracts come into play now. It used to be just a verbal agreement between gentlemen, and that was good enough, and it was done. But when people wouldn't fully commit and follow through on those things, we had to put legal writings in place to kind of, quote unquote, force their commitment, right? And, committing to God, it is like a contract. There's requirements and things that go along with it. And if we don't follow through and do what we're supposed to do, we in essence are breaking our commitment and our contract with them. And then of course, we suffer whatever the consequences that God's laid out for us. And I think that's one of the reasons why you see so many references, because we need to be reminded it is a continual thing to commit and be committed. It's not a one-time deal.
That's a good point, too, because I've had to be careful about that as well, because I love college football as well. But if that's going to be my number one thing that I love and cherish the most, what did I just do? Now God's on the back burner. Is that where he needs to be? Absolutely not. And it's, like I said, when you get older, you start realizing, like, you have choices. Do you want to do the thing that you love the most, or do you want to back up a little bit? It's like, okay, it's not participating in those things that's wrong. It's when it becomes more important, because now I'm more committed to this, and God's somewhere over here. No, it can't work that way. Yes, sir.
Yeah, he said, reminded me of a sermon I heard many years ago. I don't remember exactly what the title of it was, but something about, is your God or is your faith or is your religion, something like that, making you miserable. And the whole point of that was, is you know what you need to do, you know what the right thing is and all that kind of thing, but you're not committed enough to do that, and so it just makes you miserable because you're not doing what you know you need to do, and so your faith makes you unhappy, or your God or religion makes you unhappy. And I can think of years ago, we went through a period where, are we going to go on Wednesday night? We make a decision, we're going to go or not, we're tired, or, the kids at school, or, it's so far, or it's dark, or it's raining, whatever it may be. And we finally got to the point, fortunately, that we made a decision one time that when services happen, we're going. We don't have to wrestle with it anymore, because without being that fully committed to that, you're kind of torturing yourself back and forth, and we're going to go or not going to go, not going to do it, we're not going to do it, that kind of thing. It just makes you miserable. If you just make the decision one time and live with that decision, live with that commitment, then you don't have to go through that miserable wrestling match. And I'd never gone on those times where I kind of dragged myself and never regretted it too, so I told myself that. But it's a matter of making a decision, once and for all, and just live with that and do that. And that's a commitment thing.
Yeah, I remember Ed saying in his preachings, in my house, nobody asks, are we going to services tonight? Are we going to class on Wednesday night? No, they don't ask, are we going? They know we're going, right? That's the commitment.
Yeah, it's very, very liberating to make that decision and not have to wrestle that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. You can fight yourselves like, okay, do I feel like going to worship services? I could skip class and still go to church, right? I mean, is that our mindset? For me, it's all about that readiness, is that eager to get up. Whether it's a Sunday morning or I got to get off of work, get home, take a shower, get here on Wednesday. That's not something I'm battling. That's something I look forward to. That's something I love. I love it when I come here and see all of you, because you're my brother. We have sisters at home, right? I see a lot of smiles here, but no, I'm serious. I mean, you guys are family here, okay? When my dad was in the hospital, not getting off sidetracked, and one of the doctors had come up and said, okay, who's family? I said, this is it. And they were just stunned by that. So think really clearly to yourself, who's your family? Who's closer to you? Is it someone down the block, or is it someone that you get to worship God with every Sunday and Wednesday? And what a blessing that is. But again, it won't feel like anything if you don't want to commit to it. I think I saw a hand. Yes, sir.
Kind of going back to your question earlier about why in the scriptures is the idea or concept of commitment repeated so often. And I think one thing is God knew that man would struggle with being committed. And I think about the book of Deuteronomy and Moses reminding the people of what they had been through and all that God had done for them. And then what he expected of them to do when they went into the land of Canaan. And what they were, the reason that they should be committed to this was because God, as was said earlier, God totally committed himself to them. And then, of course, that had to be repeated over and over, and they still didn't do it. They still didn't do what utterly destroyed the people of Canaan. They compromised and went off track. And so the fact is, God knew and knows that this is something we'll struggle with. It is being fully committed to his instructions and to his will. So that's why it's repeated for us and lessons for us to learn from.
Charlie?
I'm going to add to Craig, one thing that should help us be motivated to our commitment is, and I didn't bring him up because Trey brought up Jesus, but God. Think about God. I mean, he created this world for us, wanted a relationship with us, the very first thing he did when we violated that was make a pledge, a commitment, to send Jesus. Then you have all the Israelites time and time and time and time again, and God stays committed through all of that. I mean, he's been committed since the beginning of time. And so anytime we're weak in commitment, we just need to think about God a little bit, and it should rejuvenate us.
So, John, and then I'll get you, Trey.
When you first mentioned the topic, the one idea that came to mind was Jonah. Craig mentioned, it's a struggle to be committed, and there's certainly a lot of people that kind of go back and forth in this path, go whichever direction and struggle with that commitment. But then I think there's also a great number of people that struggle being committed to the right things, and I think you see that in Jonah. I think Jonah intellectually knew who God was and understood what he should be doing, but he was certainly committed and dug in his heels towards his dislike for the people of Nineveh, and certainly didn't want to go there under all costs. And you see that throughout the book of Jonah. I think a lot of times we struggle with that as well. We intellectually know what we should do, but we're committed to doing something opposite.
That's exactly right, Trey.
To that, I think we all need to examine the reasons why we're committed as well. It was referred that Jesus talks a lot about commitment, and he was really harsh on people that were following him. It's amazing. I wouldn't think any popular teacher today is nearly as harsh on the people that are coming to listen to him as Jesus was. He was very blatant, like, if, let the dead bury their own dead. Come and follow. He who, puts his hand to the plow and looks back is not worthy. He was like getting people to either make a serious commitment or don't commit at all, because he knew that there were a lot of benefits to following him a little bit. And I think really, especially in America, being a Christian is the best way to live. Probably anywhere, but there's so many benefits if we're just honest with ourselves. And there's so many benefits to being a Christian here. We're generally accepted by the population, as long as we're not like super Christians, like as long as we're not telling people about Christianity, we're usually pretty popular with people. There's a lot of wisdom to the scriptures that can make us more successful. There's just a lot of benefits. So we got to think, why are we committed?
Chris?
Kind of a lot of the comments kind of made me think about what is the flip side of commitment. And in a lot of these situations, what comes to mind for me is comfort. Is a lot of times the big enemy to being committed to something, to being willing to push forward towards something, is being comfortable, is being content right where you're at with, I'm fine with this circumstance, with, I could be focused on moving in this direction, but I'm actually kind of fine because I'm sort of headed that way, and it's okay, and if I happen to get knocked a little off course, well, that's not a big deal. And so I think a lot of times our own comfort, the benefits that we have in our lives, whether it's a job or a home or friends, family, spouse, whatever it may be, those comforts can keep us from being committed if we're not careful.
And to feed off on that, I was just thinking as well, if we're going to be more committed to something else, like we want someone or something or whatever that prized possession is, I'll get to you guys in a second, then our focus is no longer on what it should be. And once again, we'll get mad, we'll get frustrated, we'll start taking it out on God. It's like, how could you let this happen? What did he do all of a sudden? More like, what did you do? And it goes back to the very beginning. What did Adam and Eve do, right? They only had one job, right? Not to do the one thing when they couldn't even do that. If you think it was hard growing up as a kid when your parents told you not to do something but you did it anyway and you got punished, what were you expecting? You think being adults, like, well, there's no rules, there's nothing. Okay. Well, just remember this, if I am in my vehicle right now and I'm driving recklessly or speeding, what's going to happen? The police are going to pull me over. There are rules. We have to go by them. Yes, sir.
I was just thinking from a slightly different perspective, and I agree with what Trey said. For super Christians, you can receive a little bit of resentment, but overall, I think people, even of the world, appreciate commitment. They appreciate athletes who are committed. They appreciate, there's a lot of appreciation in the world for commitment, so to speak. And even we're told to be committed because wives, as long as they are committed, could win their husbands over to Christ. 1 Peter 3. And so I guess my point is I think if other people sometimes see that we are committed or see our persistence, it also is very much a testament to who God is for us. His commitment to us, so to speak.
Mike, that's your hand.
I was just going to say, commitment, it's an actionable word too. I mean, if you're going to be committed to something, you're going to have to take action. And a couple of things that I think about when I say that, just a couple of examples, recently, Pincy and I, I had lost a diamond in my ring, and I had to wait like 6 weeks. And she's like, well, you can't go outside without your ring on. I'm like, I don't need a ring to be committed, so I've made that commitment. So there's nothing that has to bond me to that. Another example, and I'm kind of leading up to this, but if you think about the men who are in the service, when they go to war, they make a commitment to move forward. They're going to go forward no matter what. They're going to risk their life. They've made that commitment. They're going forward. And if they die, then they're dying in the commitment. And then tying that back into the Bible, the apostles, they were committed. They spoke about Jesus no matter what. And they gave up their lives with that commitment. So, if we think about commitment, our nation, our world could come to it sometime in the future, but are we willing to say that we stand for Jesus no matter what? If the government comes and wants to take things from us, are we going to stand up? Or are we going to sit back and say, oh yeah, I'm not a Christian, and let them pass by my house and go someplace else so I can be protected, or will we stand up? That's real commitment.
Eric, Senior, do you have something?
The Apostle Paul said to run the race that's set before you. You're not going to run if you're not committed to run. Either you're going to run or you don't. But if you're going to run, you've got to run with purpose.
That's a good point. Charlie?
I was just going to suggest that in a spiritual context, everyone's committed. God speaks to that in Romans 6:16, where he said, do you not know you are slaves to whomever you choose to obey, whether sin unto death or obedience unto righteousness? So everybody's committed spiritually. It's a matter of whether or not, what the focus of that commitment is. Takes a lot less focus, quite frankly, to be committed to the world. But we're committed whether we want to be or not. From a spiritual context, God saw to that.
Yes, sir.
Earlier we were talking about assembly. It reminded me of Hebrews chapter 10. A couple verses says, let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering. Next verse, let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds, not forsaking our own assembly together, but encouraging one another. So not only are we committed to God, but we're making a commitment to each other that we're going to stay in this together, we're going to support each other, and we're going to encourage each other. And by not doing those things, then we're a discouragement to one another.
I see more hands. So, yes, sir. Sorry.
Just real quick, a few years ago, one of his favorite analogies was Christianity likened to bacon and egg breakfast. That the chicken was involved, but the pig was committed. He liked to use that illustration.
It's pretty good. I started thinking about Moses as well. You think about what he did, everything that he had to endure, right? But even he struggled after everything that, really being just tested with, and he had to deal with all those people and everything. And it boggles your mind a little bit because you're like, man, how does he keep doing it? He leads God's people out of Egypt and everything. It always gets me when I read that story. I know it's very well read and everything, but that had to be very complicated because regardless of what was happening or going on, he still stayed the task. Yeah, he wasn't perfect, but he did do what was asked of him to do. I started thinking about commitment and everything that's not biblical scripture, but I started thinking about myself a little bit. I enjoy playing softball, but as anyone knows, I'm not very good at it. I go there and have fun. The guys that I play with, you can tell that they're very competitive, and they're having fun. And I started looking at myself and like, okay, so which one are you once again? Are you more the competitive side, or are you just having fun with this? And I don't want to, try to mix that with, don't do that with, when you're studying the Word of God or anything. Don't make it a competitive thing. Don't just do it for fun. Take this, as a very serious moment. Are you ready just to be here? Is it just enough for you? What is it? How are you really approaching this? And we have so many examples here in the Bible, but again, which one do you kind of find yourself relating to a little bit more? I think I see hands fly up, but I think you guys are scratching your heads, so. Ryan.
And it was always striking to me in Hebrews 11:24, by faith Moses, when he was growing up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. So, Moses understood what he needed to be committed to, and rejecting being a prince and the royalty and the gold for God was always been striking to me. So when you brought up Moses, that came right to mind.
It's just a story that I loved growing up as a kid, listening to and reading, because there's so many movies and things done about it. But again, going back to your point, like you said, Moses knew what needed to be done. But again, he could have chosen a different route, but he didn't do it.
Very comfortable route, like we said earlier. Lavish, relaxed, rather be mistreated for the Lord. So.
Yep. There's always that different road you can take. You can take the more complicated one, or you can take the one that has less complications. You will have them, but you'll have less of them if you just commit to the Lord in everything that you do. See any other hands? No? Alrighty. Considering I don't really know everything else that I wrote, like I had everything written down. Yes, I was committed to it, but I guess I wasn't committed to remembering everything that I had, because I had it down with pages and everything. And I was like, okay, this is my PowerPoints. So lesson learned, if you're going to do something, make sure you can memorize it as well, and not just, rely so much on a notebook and a pad and everything. I really didn't have much more than that. I did want to close out with this though. I can't remember his name because, once again, it was in my notebook. But there was a man that was a pilot. He was a pilot for a long period of time. And then he started doing stunt work. And he was at this air show. Been doing it for over 20 years. And he had this plane that he tricked out. And, he got too comfortable, is what I'm saying. And he didn't check his plane, basically. And so when he was at this air show, people were, flying around their planes. And all of a sudden, his crashed and hit a bunch of people and killed them. My point is we shouldn't get too complacent about what we're doing. Because if we start overlooking things, it eventually start killing us inside just a little bit. Because we're trying to probably focus on the wrong things and try to bring it into the right things. Or vice versa. We can't do that. I remember growing up, I went to FC camp, and I'm looking at the young boys back there in the back. I had a bunch of friends that I grew up with. We all did the exact same thing, what we're doing right now. And more than half of them fell away. It happens. It's just, it's complicated because you would have thought that their lives would have been what I'm looking at right now, but no. It's everything but. And it's hard to see. You can't be friends with them. You can't talk to them. It's just, because the moment you do, they want to invite you to do something that you would not want to do. So I had to refrain myself from them. And it wasn't just FC, it was people that I grew up with in other places. So again, you guys in the back, you have choices. I don't know what you guys have to go with every single day. I can't imagine being too different when I was growing up or when your dads were growing up. You have a choice. What do you want to commit more to? Mike, did I see your hand up?
Well, yeah, I was thinking about Moses, and then somebody mentioned Peter, and you think about all these other ones just throughout, and you look at, okay, then you have ones like Joseph, you have Daniel, right? And I don't know if those were mentioned either, but you look at the situations of what happened with Moses, Daniel, Joseph, and then Peter, and it's probably mentioned, but it's committed to God no matter what circumstance you're in. Because the circumstances are going to change, right? So you think about Joseph. He was also in luxury for a time, right? Even before that, though, he was sent off, sold by his brothers, still committed to God. He gets in luxury, still committed to God. He's thrown in prison, still committed to God. Throughout that entire thing. So the circumstances keep changing, but he doesn't, and his relationship to God doesn't. Peter, we talked about him before. The circumstances keep changing for him, and he goes up and down with them, right? And when he feels confident, he goes full force into it. I'm going to be committed to this. And then when it's like a little girl asks him, and now the kind of the situation, Jesus is now being, persecuted or sent to death. Circumstances have changed, and he changed with it. So it's the same thing with, I had the exact same experience really growing up with kids at FC. I went there and there was a lot, they stayed faithful. There were a lot that didn't, because they let the circumstances dictate how they were going to be committed.
That's a good point. That's one of the reasons why I stay away from the news. It's easy access. You get on your phones, you get it on your laptop, you get it on your television set. You turn it on, and what do you see? Nothing but negative stuff. Do you want to be a part of it? Oh, but it's something good. What's good about it? Nothing. It's just going to bring you down. It's going to make you mad, upset. Don't be a part of it at all. Turn it off. If it's playing a bad game in your life, you don't need it. You're better without it, Did anybody else have any comments that they want to make before we end? No? All right. Well, I appreciate you guys coming out tonight. I'm sorry this didn't go the way I planned it, but everyone raising their hands and saying something, I really do appreciate that. See. Find someone who wants to close out with a prayer. Shane, will you do a closing prayer for us?
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so very much for giving us the health and ability to come here tonight, spend time with our brothers, and learn more about your word and the part that we play in being a Christian and doing the things that you've laid out for us. Thank you very much for the time and effort that Luke put into preparing the lesson. Even though things may not have gone the way he had originally planned, he still was prepared and stepped up and helped us all with a valuable lesson, and hopefully all of us were edified by the things that we heard and discussed tonight. Thank you for the health that we all have. Thank you so very much for our families, our church family, our physical families, Most of all, thank you for your son. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.